Attorney General William Barr is facing growing calls to resign ahead of testimony before the House next month. Over the weekend, more than 1,000 former Justice Department officials signed a letter. In it, they write, quote, Mr. Barr's actions in doing the president's personal bidding unfortunately speak louder than his words. Those actions and the damage they have done to the Department of Justice's reputation for integrity and the rule of law require Mr. Barr to resign. This comes after Barr overruled a sentencing recommendation for Stone, a convicted longtime ally of the president. Prosecutors in the case all resigned. Mr. Trump thanked Barr on Twitter for taking charge of the case. Barr then publicly urged the president to stop tweeting about federal cases, but he did not. For more on this, I'm joined by Weijia Jiang and Zeke Miller. Weijia is a CBS News White House correspondent. Zeke is a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press. Welcome to both of you. Weijia, let me start with you. Many thought Barr's comments about President Trump's tweeting were shocking. They'd never heard him sort of publicly criticize the president like that. But was the White House informed beforehand?
Well, we have learned that the Attorney General gave the White House a heads up that he had done this interview and the contents of what he was going to say, because it was pretty alarming to hear him go against President Trump in this way, not only saying that he had a problem with what the president was tweeting, but also that the content made it impossible for him to do his job. But critics are very quickly pointing out that perhaps Barr staged the interview in its entirety and told the White House he was going to do that because he really had no choice but to sort of answer to why he intervened in the Roger Stone case. So the fact that he actually let the president know what he was going to say before he said it is creating some more trouble for him. Because, again, people are wondering, what his real motivation is here. You heard Democrats saying that, even though he says that he won't be bullied by anybody, that he's not influenced by President Trump, they argue that his actions speak louder than words. And certainly Barr has a record of making decisions where at least it can be easily perceived that he is influenced by President Trump because, a lot of these cases involve people who the president considers either a friend or a foe. And so I think Barr has a lot more questions to answer. But for his part, the president hasn't really weighed in much, except on Twitter, saying that, Barr said that the president didn't ever ask him to do anything in criminal cases, but he would have the legal right to do so if he wanted to. But certainly after an interview like that, where we would typically expect President Trump to go hard back at Barr, that hasn't happened yet.
Well, Weijia, if Attorney General Barr was hoping that interview would alleviate some of the criticism that's being directed at him, it's certainly not doing that. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer slammed Barr yesterday, and here's what he had to say.
Look, Bill Barr has done Trump's bidding instead of protecting rule of law, which is what an attorney general is supposed to do. Reducing that sentence and listening to Trump, the sentence that was given to Roger Stone fit into the guidelines. There are federal guidelines. He wasn't doing any special favor, nor was anybody going after him in particular. He did a lot of serious crimes, and they fit into the guidelines. They should not be changed.
So, Weijia, how is the White House responding? Is it choosing to sort of ignore all the furor around the Stone sentencing?
Yeah, I think so, because, they maintain that the Attorney General didn't do anything wrong. And even the Democrats in that letter that you mentioned, Tanya, acknowledge that Barr is not likely going to go anywhere. And certainly I don't think his job security is at risk because overall we know that President Trump is pleased with Barr's performance. And in fact, just a couple hours before that explosive interview aired, the president did an interview himself and was asked about Barr and what his own life would have been like if he had gone with William Barr instead of Jeff Sessions to begin with. And the president said his life would have been a lot easier, which was a very telling answer. You'll remember that Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation, which ultimately opened the door for it to continue. And so the president is suggesting that if Barr had been in charge, perhaps that interview or that investigation rather would not have gone on, and his life would not have been so difficult. So overall, the point is that I think the president is happy with Barr's performance. So if Democrats are complaining about it, certainly the White House isn't going to chime in. They're just sort of letting this all play out. And they realize what they're calling for, but Barr's not going to resign, and the president's not going to call for his resignation. At least I don't think so anytime soon.
That is a very telling answer, Weijia, but also not one likely to turn down the heat on Barr anytime soon. Zeke, Barr will face a House hearing later next month. What do lawmakers want answers from him on?
No, that's really the challenge for Democratic lawmakers come that hearing next month. They have so much that they want to press William Barr on, everything from the Mueller investigation that concluded a year ago to the handling of to some elements of the Ukraine investigation to now this issue of potential political interference in criminal sentencing and other criminal investigations, the efforts by the president to investigate his political rivals. All of those things together pose a sort of a, there's a lot there that Democrats want answers to, and only in a short amount of time, and certainly a short public attention span. So for Democrats, as that hearing comes about towards the end of next month, they're going to have to sort of focus in on a couple of those issues if they want to effectively make the case to the American people and sort of expose something and to basically tell a story to the American people about the conduct of the Justice Department under William Barr. That's going to be the challenge for them. Which of those sort of avenues will they, lines of questioning, will they decide to dial in on? We don't quite know yet, but they certainly have a lot of questions they want answers to, and not a lot of time to get them.
And Zeke, just to pivot a bit now, you have a new report about fundraising by pro-Trump groups. What are the numbers for January, and how are they doing compared to the 2020 Democrats in terms of cash flow?
Well, so the Trump campaign and the Republican National Committee, including their two joint fundraising committees, that's sort of the standard hard dollar pro-Trump group. They raised $60 million in the month of January. That is a fundraising record for a presidential campaign at this time in the cycle. And that is certainly blowing Democrats out of the water right now in terms of their funding is all split up among all those campaigns. That said, there are billionaires in this race. Tom Steyer, Michael Bloomberg on the Democratic side, who have been contributing in Bloomberg's case far more than what Trump has raised in that time frame. But the Trump campaign views that fundraising as an indication of their organizational success. It's certainly more than they raised at this time 4 years ago, but pretty much by a factor of 10. So they're feeling pretty confident about that, where they are in the cycle right now, and where they are positioned versus Democrats.
All right, and so Weijia, before we let you go, the president attended a wedding yesterday. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so one of the president's closest advisors, Stephen Miller, also one of his most controversial ones, got married to Katie Waldman, who is the press secretary to Vice President Mike Pence. And this is a long weekend. I was down in Florida with the president all weekend, and typically he would have stayed probably today and come back this evening, but he went to the Daytona 500, which actually felt a lot like a campaign rally that Zeke was just talking about, because he hit on some of his favorite points. He even played some of the same music. The crowd was chanting 4 more years. Anyway, he made a pit stop there. Sorry about that. And rushed back to Washington so he could attend this wedding between Miller and Waldman at the Trump Hotel. And so, yeah, I mean, you can imagine the guest list included a lot of administration officials, the president himself, and they really, I think, wanted to keep this under wraps until last minute because everyone deserves a little privacy on their wedding day, but certainly it's out there. And it is a controversial relationship just because Miller himself is such a controversial figure. So there are a lot of supporters of them, but also a lot of folks who had some things to say, because you'll remember he has crafted a lot of the president's more controversial policies when it comes to immigration. She used to be a spokesperson over at Homeland Security, and perhaps that's when they really started chatting because those two had to work together a lot to deliver the message that, again, is not always received well when it comes to immigration by Americans. But they're married. I think it's Mr. and Mrs. Miller now, and we'll see them around here at the White House.
A Washington wedding through and through. All right, well, Weijia Jiang and Zeke Miller, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.